can do it. All right, well, we will go ahead and call the meeting to order. If you can stand with us, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance real quick, and then we'll do the roll call. And kick us off, Mr. Jones. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, Bridget, we can go ahead and do roll call.
Okay, Mrs. Heights,
Here.
Mr. Jones,
Here.
Ms. Lima,
Here.
Mr. Levinson,
Here.
Dr. Schultes.
Here. All right, do I have a motion to approve the agenda for this evening?
Second.
Okay, Mrs. Heights,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Lima,
Yes.
Mr. Levinson,
Yes.
Dr. Schultes.
All right, so we have an update this evening on the proposed boundary changes. So Dr. Hill, are we ready, or is Mr. Bingham ready to, or who, I don't know who you all have bringing up, so.
That's a good question. I'm looking at Clint. Yeah, Shannon will come up.
Would you just like me to launch into it? So we had a meeting this evening over at Appleton Elementary School that had been advertised to about 28 children's parents who reside inside of a box that we've defined for a potential redistricting into Redlands Middle School that lies between 21 Road 25 Road on the west and east, and north of G Road all the way to the Book Cliffs. The meeting was also advertised by the principal among the entire clientele of Appleton Elementary. From the look of the room, it looked like we had about 45, maybe 50 folks there. Really constructive conversation. I would say half of the room was in favor of what we were proposing. There are some geographic differences. So between 21 Road and 22 Road is kind of the transition from the Appleton neighborhood to the Fruita neighborhood. And there were two residents that thought that the line should be at 22 Road instead of 21 Road from a community identity standpoint. And then there were 10 families in the room, and I have 7 of their cards right here that wanted us to expand the scope of the proposed boundary change to include the area between 25 Road and 26 Road, which is currently districted into West. I have not had time to do analytics on exactly what that would look like. I was in a do no harm state of mind when I identified the change that was proposed for the Appleton community. So I didn't really want to expand into any further tampering with the west boundary. But I agreed at the meeting that I would explore that on your behalf and report those results to you as quickly as I could regarding the percentage of people who already attend Redlands Middle School from the area between 25 Road and 26 Road, and then identify what the impacts of admitting or including the 6th grade students that live in that area in the boundary, proposed boundary change group. The proposal was for next year's sixth grade students only. We would dual bus that area and transition it into Redlands. As you continue to consider the Fruita grade reconfiguration as a board and as a committee, and think about what you want to do with that. And then there were some questions about what our ultimate intent was. And so I answered those as transparently as I possibly could. There is also another group of folks that live north of about L Road that feel that from a proximity standpoint, given how far out they are, that they might be best served long-term by continuing to attend Fruita, just because of the distance they have to cover. There was a little bit of a rural versus urban conversation in the room about how people feel about their identity, and I would say there was a significant group of people in the room that were excited about the new Grand Junction High School, even though it is a more urban setting for schooling than where they reside. So I would say in general, the consensus of the room was to take the box that I drew and slide it southeast by 1 mile. Everyone in the room seemed to think that Redlands Parkway Bridge and the 24 road feed into Redlands Parkway was not a significant problem, excepting the people that live north of about L Road, for whom that would be a significant distance to come south. So there were those three groups: people who would like us to go farther east, people who think that 21 Road is more of a Fruita identity than an Appleton identity, and the people that are on the north edge of the thing that felt more proximate to Fruita. Nevertheless, there was another family that stepped forward and said, we live up there almost at the Book Cliffs as well, and we feel we would prefer to go to Redlands Middle School, even though it is a considerable distance. And another family that stepped forward and said, we already go to Redlands Middle School from there and would prefer that to continue. I didn't clarify whether or not transportation would change or whether or not their circumstances would change because they got a bus ride. But that was essentially the gist of the meeting. We were in the room for about an hour and 5 minutes. Everybody was extremely constructive. I did not see any tears shed. So I think it was a good meeting, and that's the status of it. I would be delighted to run some more analytics on these three factional areas that might slightly change your decision-making ahead of your meeting on the 18th. I will be here in person to represent the material formally for you, and would be delighted to respond to any other direction that you would offer.
I would just add, if you don't mind, just from the meeting, the takeaway, and Clint was there, Bill, you were there the whole time, so I'd like to hear their perspective on what they heard as well. I think the takeaway I had made sense was, I think the sense was keeping the Appleton kids together instead of having the kids splinter off to two different middle schools, to have them stay together because that's their friends, and that seemed very reasonable. Which would be, it sounds like a fair percentage already go to Appleton, some via school of choice, some because that's where they feed, I guess. But so that was a takeaway. The other thing that struck me was, and maybe this is for our board to do, is I think Shannon was right. As much of the conversation had to do not so much about the middle school, but about high school and future plans, where are we going? And the board vision came up a number of times, what's the end goal here? And it may be something we collectively give a mission or with our administration and say, here's where the end goal is going to be. Now, when that is, we're not sure. And Shannon did point it out, from his perspective about, and we've talked about this at length over time, about Fruita High School being 9-12, right? And then the 8-9 school being a regular middle school and so forth. But I think there's still some questions about that, so that might be something we give a definitive, this is where we're heading with this, if that's where we are. The other takeaway, on the continuum of options, because people were talking about being grandfathered in and all those kinds of things, and there were some people very adamant about they're Fruita people, that's where they want to be, and then people who lived out, I didn't even know there was an area way out north by the Book Cliffs that people live out there about, some options. And I think I was talking to Clint about it, that there are, historically, from the perspective I've had in the district, we've offered anything from, sometimes you just pull the Band-Aid and that's it. The boundary's made and that's where you're going to go, which has always been pretty harsh. And I think that's, if it's been used, it's been very sparingly. A lot, Shannon suggested or alluded to this, at the district, historically, the boards historically have really bent over backwards not to disrupt families and all those kinds of things. If it's grandfathering families in to the point where maybe up till, if you have a middle schooler going to Fruita High School and you have a sibling there, we're going to keep that going. But if you have a preschooler, right, that has no connection, that's maybe where the line's drawn. So that's something, again, there's lots of options on that continuum of how do you grandfather somebody in or not. One thing we, just point of information, one thing, because I was part of this at the school, that we did do boundary changes, and we offered, I remember, and it seemed to be very successful, busing for a year, and then after that, you could still go to your school of choice, but we, as a district, we just can't afford to keep busing. But in families, what you found was initially they would keep going to that school, but over time they would go to where Shannon was suggesting, we really want to have people go to Junction High, right, if you're in that area. And so over time that happens, but we can, again, those are step 16 and 17, we're not there yet, but to really look at, there are a number of options on how to accommodate people so we're not disruptive and still get to the end goal of where I think we all think we should be at. Some of that is just grandfathering or having spaces available at the school, but we just can't always provide busing, and I think people will, there's a lot of things we can look at there. But in general, I think it was keeping kids together, having us give a long-term vision. When I say long-term, maybe the next 2 years, where we see Fruita High School being, where we see the 8-9 school being, where we see, Redlands being, those kinds of things, which I think we've, over the many months and maybe even longer than that, have pretty much articulated where the end goal would like to be. So, I don't know, Clint, Mel, did you pick up anything different or in addition to, or? Because I know you were gathering cards from people.
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts from me. I thought that in general, we had, I think in general, everybody was very accepting of the idea to do the boundary change. There were a few outliers that were concerned about their location and how it would affect them. But in general, I think everybody was pretty accepting. My only concern, and I expressed this to Shannon and to Doug as well, is those folks that want us to make the adjustments to the boundaries inside the Fruita or the Grand Junction address area, if we don't stay consistent with addresses in Grand Junction and Fruita, in my mind, we're still doing the same thing that we did in the past, and that is not stay consistent with where students are going. If you're in Grand Junction, you're going to Grand Junction, and if you're in the Fruita boundary, you're going to Fruita. For me, the consistency is important if we're going to move forward with it. I understand the concerns of those that live towards the Book Cliffs, and I get where they're coming from. I just think we have a tough choice to make there, but in my mind, we stay consistent.
They can still school of choice.
And they can still,
They can still
yeah,
apply for that.
absolutely.
If we have just, I'm guessing there aren't that many
12 to 20
family
kids
there? Okay.
north of
Yeah.
Bell Road, and every mile farther you go north, it winnows away to less than a dozen. So it's not a handful. It's not 50, it's, it's, depending upon where we would draw that line, it's 12 to 20. And then the kind of the rural transition where you get away from estate residential housing into more farmland in that corridor, north-south between 21 Road and 22 Road. I think there are probably 25 children in that corridor as well. It's the 25 Road, the 26 Road corridor that I haven't parsed all of the student behaviors yet to say who's at West, who's already at Redlands, who's driving into Fruita. And I'm going to try to do that tonight and report that back to Dr. Hill tomorrow.
I think my question would be if we're still going through the analysis and if we don't hear, if we hear the recommendation on Tuesday without folks having a chance to, if we change something from now, I feel like we're not giving folks due time to give us feedback. So I don't love that.
And I think that's fair. I was thinking the same thing at the meeting. If we've got a whole lot of smiles we could put on faces by making a few adjustments, it would probably be in our best interest to offer the due process to go along with it. But I don't know what sort of schedule the district is on trying to accomplish this. It's my understanding that we've already fully staffed both FMS, F89, and Redlands Middle School, so there's not really a staffing implication. But there might be some SOC implications on needing to reopen the window. I don't know exactly.
I don't think we want to reopen any windows, and you're right, we are staffed, and we talked about that as a senior leadership. I think it was more about just giving folks enough time, like we didn't want to make a decision after school was already out. So if the board needs more time, or if we need more time for that to happen, then I guess we could bring it back potentially the first meeting in May. That's why we added it to tonight's agenda, because we thought, well, maybe we can get it in on next Tuesday and then start letting families know right away. But if that's too fast, then we can, maybe you can report back still on Tuesday, but then maybe not voting until the May meeting, unless we need to call a meeting in between there. It's for us, it's just more about letting families know with enough advance before they go into the summer break.
I would say a very high percentage, and I would be amenable to that plan, and as from a scheduling standpoint. And I think a high percentage of the families that would be affected were in the room. Would you agree with that?
I would agree.
So I think that we did a pretty good job of informing them even on short notice.
We were very intentional with email communication and direct phone calls to them, to each of the affected families.
But do I understand if we're saying to just like move it by a mile and chunk off this area, those are additional changes and those families were not explicitly solicited?
Correct.
Yes.
So we talking about maybe instead of voting on this next Tuesday, is push it out a little bit, get this new information out to people, and maybe, personally, I don't think you may not get many people showing up to even call another meeting at Appleton, and you shows up, it shows a good faith that we, have tweaked some things, and maybe you may draw more people in or do a virtual type meeting like we've done in the past, but to have that, another opportunity, I think, would bode well, and, yeah.
One more opportunity, as long as we can
By,
do it really timely, so that we have time to let people know.
well, I think you're right, to get it by early May would be.
These folks all wrote their names on their cards so I could actually phone them. So,
Yeah, and
Well, but
I'm looking over at Nikki, and then I'm making sure I'm not saying the wrong thing here. The reason why we want to do it quicker was just about families knowing, right? It didn't impact staffing or anything for us. Okay.
Yeah, I would say, for me, it's not so much about the people who already we were in contact with. It's about the other people. Yeah.
yep.
So another email blast out and to those Appleton families?
Next,
Yeah, we need another meeting.
Okay.
We're going to start missing each other.
Yep.
Just
Understood.
kidding.
Got it.
it's true, actually.
Yeah,
You guys aren't hanging out enough.
I think everybody's around now, so it shouldn't be a big deal to add another one.
Are we saying another meeting with the community or another meeting for the
think
board to
another
discuss it?
meeting- I thought another meeting with the community, and then follow up maybe even that same night, or, yeah. something like that.
I'd be delighted to go back to Appleton Wednesday night, and we could push this back out through the email trail to the folks that are between 25 Road and 26 Road who have not been in the loop, and give them an opportunity to be heard. And then at your next meeting, then you would have all the info.
So when you push out the meeting, would you push out ahead of time, let people see the changes or the proposed changes before they come to the meeting, or just give it to them that night?
We could redraw the box and send that as part of the correspondence if the board and the superintendent directed me to do that.
We could call it like a study, you know, because it's not, I mean, we're just studying it, right? And then we're talking about it and we're getting more information, so like.
Maybe just the two things that we're looking at that are being considered.
Yeah. So not presented as the, yeah, options, yeah.
Quickly.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if maybe I'm way off. I think it is good that we purposefully contact those families. I wonder if some of them may have even been there tonight, because my understanding is that the principal sent out a communication to the whole school, and there were no maps. So I think a lot of people probably showed up just because they're in the Appleton, it's in the zone. But if we can at least target the messaging to any of the families that maybe weren't targeted with our messaging, and try to see if they can show up, then that would be good. And then however you want to send it out, I don't know if we send them maps, is it more confusing to have it, but also having them come in with some
It could be more
ideas?
confusing, you send it without explanation behind it.
But I think you could do, this is what it is now, this is what we're proposing to do, this is how you would be affected. And that they would understand that, take time to look at it, and then when Shannon comes to this meeting, it's more conversation.
In big letters that it's just proposed, that nothing has been done.
Well, Shannon, he was very good about that. He mentioned half a dozen times, if not more, the board's considering this, and these are proposals, so he did a real nice job. No decisions had been made at this point, so.
Good.
Good job, Shannon, thank you. And thank you for attending, Doug, and everybody who showed up.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
All right,
I'm so sorry. Clint, really quickly, the current boundaries as they are, so when you were urging caution about the Fruta and Junction division, right now, the proposed, I'm calling it option 1, the option as presented tonight, as opposed to option 2, which shifts the square down and over a mile, is option 1, does that honor those boundaries? Okay, so you feel comfortable.
But there's clarification. What we're talking about tonight is a middle school boundary change, not a high school boundary change. But it is consistent with the trajectory of our prior conversations regarding what we want to do to facilitate grade reconfiguration in Fruta. It is consistent with that effort.
Okay.
But this is a middle school boundary change, not a high school boundary change.
Got it.
Right, but our middle school, so do we split our middle schools as feeders into the high schools?
We were talking about splitting Redlands, right?
Well, if we address the 25 Road to 26 Road area that the parents that came tonight wanted to be in Redlands anyway, we would unify Appleton as an all Redlands attendance school.
Being asked.
Which they were requesting. But again, this is a middle school boundary change. It doesn't have, no decisions have been made on anything else we're doing here. But this does put 4 elementary schools feeding Redlands Middle School, which is good. It gets us to where we want to be from a student body size standpoint in the Redlands. And so it's consistent with our long-term goals in that regard.
Yeah, it sets up the trajectory for everything else.
So, Clint, when you're talking about Fruta and Junction, like addresses, is that to feed into Fruta and Junction high schools? Is that what you're talking about with the consistency piece?
Yeah, well, so that's what we talked about tonight was if we make these lops off of those boundaries that we have right now, we may have some families that have Grand Junction addresses going to Fruta still. And I think that's what we wanted to get away from.
Gotcha.
That's, again, those are things that I think we should keep in mind. If we stay consistent now, then we don't have to back and do this again later, or somebody else has to go back again later and make those changes.
Will that have a positive impact on transportation as well? Making that delineation between who's really addressed in Grand Junction. and
Yeah, what's your basis? I understand your point. What's your basis? Why does it matter? Tell us why it matters.
Yeah.
Why does what matter?
Why does that distinction matter so much?
Well, for me, it matters because of the consistency of what we're saying we're going to do with our Grand Junction addresses and Fruita addresses. Now, from the busing standpoint, we're going to end up probably doing more busing because we have students further out. So, that's going to change a little bit for us. But long-term, I think we're doing the right thing by staying consistent with keeping our boundaries. Again, Grand Junction addresses, Fruita addresses. We're separating the two. Does that make sense?
Kind of does. I'm going to be obtuse here because I'm feeling my brain is not processing it quickly. Why does it matter? Walk us through why it matters. So it makes sense.
How about what's the consistency that it gives us?
Yeah.
Are you, and yeah, I'm trying to understand. So are you saying that if we don't do that, then we get ourselves in a situation where we're doing these little carve-outs to try, and so if there's a way to have, I don't know, if you're trying to have some sort of criteria, like we're trying to get junction families to go to junction schools, but I don't know if that's actually gonna end up happening, because I don't know where the line is between Fruita and Junction.
The lines are not clear. I mean, our Grand Junction city limits there's carve-outs everywhere, so, I mean.
I guess I'd like to
fractal.
if I could show you the map, the
Yeah, let's do
county
it.
map, right? You can see the boundary lines that have been drawn, and they very clearly delineate the Grand Junction boundary or Appleton boundaries moving into Redlands and then into Grand Junction. That's clear. If we start to lop off the top or carve out pieces, we're then,
So we're not talking about the little things. We're talking about bigger carve-outs. Is that,
those
More
families or those boundaries to the north, some of those families that we're
Okay.
asking to be moved out from the north,
Probably have Grand Junction addresses.
they absolutely have Grand Junction addresses, more than likely. And then
I think that came up where people, we moved here to go to Fruita, yet they have a Grand Junction address, and that's because we haven't been in sync with what you're talking about. And if we're in sync with that and someone moves into Grand Junction,
they know,
they can't claim, well, I'm in Fruita. No, you're not, you're in Junction, which is what they're doing now, because people have a Junction address, but they're blue
so
and.
to them, it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't,
Why-
no, because our school boundaries don't coincide with the city boundaries.
Right.
So that's what you're saying.
yeah, and I guess I would also, just to articulate it maybe even clearer, is I think that we have a great opportunity right now to right it. This is the opportunity to make it right. If we hold off and make some other choices for a handful of families, I'm not saying they're not important. I'm simply saying that this is the opportunity for us to do the change and to make the separation, to make Fruita whole and to make Grand Junction whole.
Well, I like the point that Doug made about, when you move to an area, that assumption would be very easy to make with it before you would maybe look at a detailed map of the school district boundaries, because why would you live in Grand Junction and go to Fruita?
Right.
I like that consistency, that it would make it clearer. And remember, they can always school of choice
Absolutely.
somewhere else if that's.
That makes
wanna
sense.
do.
We used to live up north off of like 24 and a quarter road, and I was always perplexed why, when my kids would hit high school at that point, that they would go out to Fruita Monument when Junction was just literally
Blocks.
a few miles south, instead of going all the way out to Fruita. And so, and that was a Grand Junction address. So I do think that makes sense in that kind of keeping that consistency, I think helps, because I think there's a lot of gray area up in that north area where it's like you have a Junction address and you're going to Fruita, and to me, it never made sense. So
Yeah.
I see what you're saying now.
This is our
As
opportunity.
far as, it's right, just correcting it. If you're in Fruita, you go to Fruita. If you're in Junction, you go to Junction. Yeah, makes sense.
What I'll,
Except for Redlands, I guess.
To say at the end, and I said, one other option is we just let everybody do exactly what they want to do.
Just a free-for-all?
Win-win for everybody. Make everybody happy.
Lottery schools all around.
No conflict. Wherever you want to go, you can. No.
You're joking, but also
I am
joking.
joking.
But I was thinking about when we did the last round of boundary changes for the Redlands area. I mean, I'm sure there were families that were like, well, I would, but you know, the board made a decision and
Well, what has really helped over the years in these boundary things, because they are emotional with people, and you have families that have generational where they've gone to Fruita or Junction, but the boards in the past, even before the prior board, have always been good about trying to work with families and whatever you want to go, grandfather them in, school of choice in them in, but they knew they had a place in there. And there was a cutoff at some point, like I said, if you have and I have parents who had a senior at Fruita, and they had a first grader at a school. Well, that's a big gap. You can't always make that family connection, but within reason, and I think Shannon brought that up, if we have a fifth grader, they don't have that connection necessary to the high school. Now, a middle schooler might, and certainly the kids at the 8-9 school, but so there's strategic decisions we can make that can make everybody happy, and over time, they're going to get used to it. Everyone else is going to Junction, everyone else is going to Fruita, and they're going to be happy with it.
And I think Shannon said that well tonight as well with regard to once this is settled and we're right, then the school of choice option is
It'll reemerge.
it will reemerge.
Flexibility will reemerge once all the dust settles. And I think the point that's trying to be made here is that after we get a 1,600-seat Grand Junction High School on board, we will have enough seats in Grand Junction to accommodate the student body with Grand Junction addresses, and we will have enough seats in Fruita Monument High School to accommodate high school students with Fruita addresses.
Yeah.
And I'll heat map that for you. I don't want to be the person that makes that decision, so that you can see who has a Grand Junction address, who has a Fruita address. But I think it's relevant because it has to do with whether or not we tack a big chunk of additional space onto Fruita Monument to continue to serve students with Grand Junction addresses in that facility. And we will probably have a chunk of empty seats in Grand Junction High School if we fail to do so.
Well, does that feed into our larger discussion about what's going to happen with Fruita? So, yeah, it seems like we need to address all of that.
Yeah, and just, I know I sent email to the board, but just to be clear for, if there is anybody watching, you know, there's other changes that we're gonna have to talk about for next school year. We were talking about looking at the Wingate area, but just it was a timing thing with that one because of the kids going to high school. So there'll be more discussions around that, and then more discussions around looking at the numbers again to figure out when can we, because we're trying to figure out how to get the right amount of students in that Fruita area so that we can fit the students in those buildings. And so, yeah, which building is it going to be and all that. We have a little bit of time because of the fact that all these changes aren't happening for next school year to even be able to pull all the students out to make those numbers work. So that's some of the work that we'll need to do to figure out and work with the faculty out there and talk about which buildings make sense and all that, and what would that look like when we make that transition for the staff.
But I want to be clear that this decision right now, just this Redlands versus West decision, does feed into those decisions. Yeah, yeah.
All right,
Yeah,
great.
tough decision, but if it was easy, it would have been done 25 years ago.
And cities grow and change and things, so, yeah, thank you guys for your work.
So I also want to make sure that we're being, so we haven't made any decisions, obviously, but it sounds like it makes sense to most of us that sticking with the Junction and Fruita boundaries might be a thing that we want to drive toward. So I definitely understand honoring those parents' requests, but if it's outside of that, you know, I'm not sure how much that could be considered. So I just want to approach option 2 with the seriousness that, you know, if it seems unlikely we would even do that, then maybe we don't move forward with that.
I'm going to present it to you in scenarios, scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3, and show the numbers to you, and that way you'll have comfort that this would be the result of this scenario, this is the result of that, here's how the addresses lay out. I'll try to lay all that out for you so that you can make a decision and have the data in front of you as you make it.
Well, and then I think with, it would be nice to hear from senior leadership out of those scenarios, kind of what their thoughts are on that, because you're going to see things that we may not see from a transportation level, or like you said, from that. So even with the scenarios, it would, just like we do with a lot of our other things, is kind of like, here's the rubric sort of, and this is what we think would be best, so. Yeah, I'd like that input as well. All right. Any other questions or comments?
Nope, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so next on our agenda, we have personnel actions, licensed and administrative personnel actions, and then administrative new hires. Do I have a motion to approve this agenda item?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All right, seeing none, we can take the vote.
Okay, Mrs. Heights?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Lima?
Yes.
Mr. Levinson? Dr. Schultes?
Yes.
All right, so next on our agenda is executive session. So I will read what the executive session is for, and then we can have a motion to move into executive session. We have executive session for the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and/or instructing negotiators under CRS Section 24-6-4024E regarding negotiations with Mesa Valley Education Association. Those in attendance in executive session would be David Price, Dr. Brian Hill, Tammy Arrett, Nikki Jost, Melanie Trujillo, and board members Mr. Jones, Ms. Lima, Mr. Levinson, Dr. Schultes, and myself. Do I have a motion to move into executive session?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, Mrs. Heights?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Lima?
Yes.
Mr. Levinson? Dr. Schultes?
Yes.
So, and then we'll adjourn from there? or do we-
Actually, we're going to stay in here. We'll
We're going to stay here, great.
these off, and then that way we'll just, so, all right.